Welcome, dear listener, to a journey through time, a story etched in the very foundations of our world. Today, we confront a chapter of human history that is often misunderstood, frequently simplified, and profoundly painful: the global slave trade. It's a story not just of cruelty, but of complex economics, shifting power, and the enduring human spirit. We're not here to judge the past by today's standards, but to understand it in all its uncomfortable truths. When we hear the word slavery, many of us immediately picture the transatlantic slave trade, the horrific journey of millions from Africa to the Americas. And rightly so, for its scale and brutality were immense, shaping continents and cultures. But to truly grasp the history of slavery, we must broaden our lens. Because the truth is, slavery, in various forms, has existed across nearly every civilization, on every continent, for thousands of years. Imagine ancient Egypt, where war captives built colossal monuments. Or ancient Rome, where a significant portion of the population was enslaved, working in mines, farms, or as household servants, sometimes even as highly educated tutors. In ancient China, debt could lead to enslavement. Across indigenous cultures in the Americas, people taken in warfare might become enslaved. This wasn't about race. It was about power, conquest, and economic necessity. It was a dark thread woven into the fabric of early human societies. One common misconception is that slavery was always a lifelong, inescapable condition, passed down through generations. While this became tragically true in many systems, particularly the chattel slavery of the transatlantic trade, earlier forms were often more fluid. In some societies, enslaved people could earn their freedom, buy it, or even be adopted into the master's family. Their children might be born free. This isn't to diminish the suffering, but to highlight the varied nature of these early systems, often driven by different cultural norms and economic structures. Now, let's turn our attention to a period and region often overlooked in mainstream narratives: the Arab or East African slave trade. For over a millennium, from the 7th century well into the 20th century, millions of Africans were forcibly taken from East Africa, the Horn of Africa, and the Sahel region. They were marched across vast deserts, enduring unimaginable hardships, to be sold in markets across the Middle East, North Africa, and parts of Asia. This trade, driven by Muslim merchants and rulers, involved the capture and sale of both men and women. Men were often destined for hard labor, sometimes castrated to prevent reproduction and quell rebellion, particularly in armies or as eunuchs guarding harems. Women were highly sought after as domestic servants, concubines, and even queens. The exact numbers are debated, but estimates range from 10 to 17 million people, a scale comparable to, if not exceeding, the transatlantic trade over its longer duration. What's crucial to understand is that the Arab slave trade was not solely about Arabs enslaving Africans. Just as in the transatlantic trade, local African rulers and merchants played a significant, often complex, role. They would capture people from rival tribes or neighboring communities and sell them to Arab traders in exchange for goods like textiles, weapons, and spices. This was a brutal economic system, where ethnicity and power dynamics superseded any sense of shared identity. The impact of this trade was profound. It depopulated vast regions, destabilized societies, and left a legacy of trauma that echoes to this day. Yet, for many, this chapter of history remains largely unknown, overshadowed by the transatlantic narrative. It's a reminder that the story of slavery is not monolithic. It's a tapestry woven with many threads, each distinct, each tragic. Let's now address another prevalent misconception: that the transatlantic slave trade was solely an American phenomenon. While the United States played a significant role, the trade was truly global, involving multiple European powers and stretching across the Atlantic. If you are enjoying the video, please leave a like and subscribe, and let us know if you have learned something new about history today. The Portuguese were pioneers, establishing trading posts along the West African coast in the 15th century. They were soon followed by the Spanish, the British, the French, the Dutch, and even the Danes and Swedes. These European nations, fueled by the insatiable demand for labor in their newly acquired colonies in the Americas, to work sugar plantations, tobacco fields, and cotton farms, created a sophisticated and utterly ruthless system. The Middle Passage, the journey across the Atlantic, is a term that barely scratches the surface of the horror. Packed like cargo into the holds of ships, often chained, deprived of sanitation, food, and water, millions perished during the voyage. It's estimated that between 10% and 20% of enslaved Africans died during the Middle Passage. For those who survived, a life of brutal exploitation awaited. And here's another often overlooked fact. Not all enslaved people from Africa went to North America. In fact, a vast majority, estimated at around 90%, went to the Caribbean and South America, particularly Brazil. Brazil alone received more enslaved Africans than any other single nation, over 4 million people. The sugar plantations of the Caribbean were equally voracious, with demand for labor so high that life expectancy for enslaved people was incredibly short, leading to continuous replenishment through further imports. This highlights the sheer scale of the economic engine driving the trade. Sugar, tobacco, cotton, these commodities became the lifeblood of European empires, built on the backs of enslaved Africans. The wealth generated from this trade fueled the Industrial Revolution in Europe, built grand cities, and financed powerful navies. It's a stark reminder of how deeply intertwined slavery was with the development of the modern global economy. Another crucial point, often glossed over, is the role of African agency, not in initiating the trade, but in navigating its treacherous waters. As with the Arab trade, European traders rarely ventured inland to capture people themselves. Instead, they relied on existing African political structures and networks. Powerful African kingdoms and chieftains, often in conflict with their neighbors, would capture people from rival groups and sell them to European traders in exchange for guns, textiles, and other manufactured goods. This doesn't absolve the European powers of their responsibility, but it complicates the narrative. It reveals a brutal reality where economic incentives and pre-existing rivalries were exploited, turning neighbor against neighbor. The consequences, of course, were devastating for all involved on the African continent. The story of the global slave trade is also one of resistance. From the moment of capture, enslaved people resisted. There were revolts on slave ships, acts of sabotage on plantations, and the formation of maroon communities, settlements of escaped slaves who fought for their freedom, like those in Jamaica and Brazil. The Haitian Revolution, led by Toussaint Louverture, stands as a monumental testament to this resistance, the only successful slave revolt that led to the creation of an independent nation. The abolitionist movements, which gained momentum in the late 18th and 19th centuries, were a powerful force, driven by moral arguments and growing awareness of the trade's inhumanity. But it wasn't just about morality. Economic shifts, the rise of industrialization making slave labor less efficient in some sectors, and the constant threat of rebellion also played a role in the eventual dismantling of these systems. Britain abolished the slave trade in 1807 and slavery throughout its empire in 1833. The United States followed with the 13th Amendment in 1865 after a brutal civil war. Brazil was the last major nation to abolish slavery in 1888. But even then, the legacy of slavery continued, morphing into new forms of exploitation and racial discrimination that persist to this day. So, what can we take away from this difficult history? First, that slavery is not a singular event, but a multifaceted, global phenomenon that has afflicted humanity for millennia. Second, that it was driven by complex factors, economic greed, power dynamics, and the dehumanization of the other. Third, that its impact was catastrophic, shaping demographics, economies, and cultures across continents. And finally, that the fight against slavery is not over. While chattel slavery may be outlawed almost everywhere, modern forms of slavery, human trafficking, forced labor, debt bondage, continue to entrap millions around the world. Understanding the past, in all its uncomfortable detail, is not about assigning blame to individuals long dead. It's about recognizing the systemic forces that allowed such atrocities to thrive and ensuring we are vigilant against their resurgence in any form. The chains may have changed, but the struggle for true freedom and dignity for all humanity remains. Let this story be a constant reminder of our shared responsibility to uphold it. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Please leave a like and subscribe, and let us know what the most interesting part of this history was for you by commenting down below.